You're listening to episode 43 of Megan Cares, the podcast, the one where I have a good old chat with Michelle Yandle. Michelle's a health and nutrition educator and coach. She currently trains health coaches through the Holistic Performance Institute, and through her online courses, one-to-one coaching, books and seminars, Michelle offers a no bullshit approach to clear nutrition confusion and get the dieters off diets so they can feel their healthiest selves without restriction. We jump off the diet conveyor belt on this one, and we look at a non-diet approach to living well and feeling good inside our bodies in midlife. I think you're going to love it. Take a listen. Let me know what you think. Kia ora. If you're a woman in midlife, this podcast is for you. Get ready to embark on a transformative journey where we tackle self-doubt, people-pleasing, imposter syndrome, and overwhelm. Celebrate this second stage of life and claim your authentic confidence and courage. Midlife is not a time to settle. It's a time to unleash your purpose into the world. Make an impact done your way without compromising your own well-being. I'm Megan Care, mindset coach, former psychosynthesis counsellor and craniosacral therapist. Are you ready? Let's begin.
Well, welcome to the podcast, Michelle Yandle. So glad you're here. Finally got us together in terms of the podcast. So tell us about who you are and what you do.
Great. Yep. So thanks, Megan. It's awesome. And we've known each other for quite some time now. So it's really cool to be on the other end of the podcast. I am Michelle Yandle. For those that don't know me, I live here in Taranaki, and my background is in health and nutrition. I am a non-diet practitioner, so I support people to improve their health without having to resort to dieting, and that may be quite different for lots of people, but we can talk a little bit about that in the podcast. I run online courses that support people with this and have a pretty long history of experience with dieting and yo-yo dieting. And it's great to be on this podcast. I know you've been talking a lot about, midlife, and I'm in that time of my life at the moment now. So I think that we'll definitely have lots to talk about during this podcast.
Yes, I was thinking about you before we started talking. I was like, oh yeah, you're in midlife, because I kind of know your age range ish. So what did inspire you to focus on a non-diet approach?
And firstly, definitely mid-age. Assuming that I live to be 90, I'm at mid-age. I'm going to do my best to live longer than that. But my history of dieting and restricting started when I was really, really young. So I always say 12 years old, but I can remember having earlier memories of being very, very young and asking my mom about the sugar quantity in mandarins, and whether if I ate too many mandarins that I would get fat. So that was obviously a fear of mine for a really long time. And I did every diet under the sun. For all of us midlife women, we know that in the 80s, there were some pretty hilarious diets out there. I've done them all, from Richard Simmons to, we had Slim Fast, and obviously Jenny Craig. She was around for a long time. I did them all, basically. And then, as I got older, I, claimed to not diet, but I was just focusing on healthy eating, quote unquote. But the healthy eating protocols that I was doing was still quite restrictive. And, you can eat this, but you can't eat that, and this is good and this is bad. So masked as healthy eating, but actually still very much entwined in dieting. And this all started from being bullied as a child because of my weight, and then later bullying myself because, my weight was never good enough in my eyes, and based on what I'd learned from society and everything we see. And it was just, and I was never healthy enough. Like, I had to be this crazed or that crazed, and had to try this diet and that diet. And eventually I just said, enough is enough. And I realized that I was doing, not just harm to myself, but I was potentially doing harm to those that I was working with as well as a nutrition coach, in that, I was continuing to recommend these healthy eating protocols that were quite strict and restrictive. And not just that, they didn't work. None of these things worked long term, which is why we were doing them over and over and over. And I thought, well, if my clients can't, and I can't maintain these changes for life, I'm actually doing everyone a disservice. And so that's when I started to look into this non-diet approach and this sort of intuitive eating, empowered eating way of increasing our health and eating better, but without the shame and guilt and restrictions that comes with diets. And of course, I realized too that a lot of the healthy eating programs, or the way that I was being so strict with my food, was actually impacting my mental health, and it was impacting my emotional health, and of course our spiritual health and our relationships, because that rigidity around food and that needing to control what we eat. And for all of us, who understand that health is so much more than the body, I realized I was doing a disservice to my body by neglecting all these key areas of health. So now what I do is a lot more, it's still health focused, but it's a lot more holistic, and we try to avoid focusing on weight, but look at better ways to gently take care of ourselves. And that's, balanced eating and good friends and getting outside and moving our bodies and reducing stress. And none of that has to do with that number on the scale. And that's the difference in what I do for myself, but also with the people I work with. And it's also about learning to listen to our bodies again, and getting in touch with the changes our bodies experience over time, and really just a gentle way to take care of ourselves and, be around for a while and have energy for our kids and grandkids and nieces and nephews and all of them. So yeah, it's been a huge shift for me. It's always a journey. It's always a work in progress, but that's where I am in my life, and also with the people that I'm working with.
Yeah, beautiful. And I imagine it took quite some unpacking, because we've known each other, I think maybe 10 years now, and professionally as well. And alongside you, or knowing you when you went through that change, and for me, getting my head around it, and it's really helped me to understand a non-diet approach to our health and well-being. But how sort of intertwined the dieting culture is in everything that we see and everything that we are, particularly for me as a woman, right? It's just what we were raised with, what our mothers did. Yeah, all the magazines they read. Richard Simmons cracks me up because I watched that as well. We had that in New Zealand.
Good.
And so through in midlife, so I guess especially peri-menopause, menopause, through that phase, because it correlates with that age, our bodies are changing. And for many of us, our bodies are increasing in weight somewhat. And funny thing, and I don't think I've talked to you about this, I remember you saying this, like probably when I was starting to go through peri-menopause, you said something like, oh yeah, women do tend to put on a little bit of weight around their middle in midlife. And the part of me that went, no, it can't be, or it won't be for me.
Yeah.
And then of course it did. That is what's happened. And I've had to come to a loving place with that this is a natural thing that happens in my body, with my body, and through midlife. So getting to my question, our bodies are going through big changes in midlife, but how do you perceive that diet culture influences the way as women we perceive and navigate these changes?
So, firstly, I'm going to talk a little bit about disordered eating, and I just wanted to clarify what I mean by disordered eating. So, because I will mention it, I'm sure, a few times during this podcast. So, disordered eating is a spectrum, right? So, it can start with the yo-yo dieting and the restriction, and it can go all the way to full-blown eating disorders. So when I mention disordered eating, I may not be referencing specifically eating disorders, though that is a possibility in some cases. But disordered eating is really that obsession with food, the obsession with our bodies being, and manipulating our bodies through food, through dieting or restricting or over-exercising, these sorts of things as well. So I just wanted to clarify that before I go on, that in this case, I may reference full-blown eating disorders, anorexia, bulimia, and others, but for the most part, I'll be talking about those disordered patterns and disordered way of eating. So you were asking about, as we navigate midlife and how does diet culture influence the way we perceive these changes? I'm just going to say that first and foremost, for people who have been on and off diets or who have been really concerned about that, it's terrifying. I'll be first to admit that, you've spent your whole life potentially, maybe successfully keeping your body looking a certain way, and that your body hasn't changed, since puberty or having children. It's sort of always has gone back to being about the same. And then suddenly midlife happens. You haven't changed how you eat. You haven't changed anything in your life potentially, but your body is changing. Your pants are getting tighter. And that can be, thanks to diet culture, an absolutely terrifying experience for lots of women. And there are two times in our lives where disordered eating and eating disorders are most prevalent, and they are when we go through puberty. So our body is changing because of those hormonal fluctuations and changes. And the second time is midlife, when we go through our own changes as women, as we transition. And so we don't talk about eating disorders or disordered eating as much in midlife, but it is the second most common. It's also a time when disordered eating and full-blown eating disorders can resurface because of those triggering changes that are happening in our bodies. So we have a really unhealthy view for many of us that have experienced diet culture about our bodies as we go through these midlife changes. Like I say, we've spent our whole lives trying to keep our bodies a certain size, and suddenly we have no control over what's going on. And, I've had women who have restricted and restricted and restricted and restricted, and their bodies holding on like hell. It's not changing. And that can be really, really scary thanks to diet culture. And it can also be really difficult as we get older to stick to diets. So that's the other thing that happens around midlife too, is that it gets harder and harder to maintain certain diets. And so that's another thing that can happen. But thanks to diet culture, it has a huge influence on how we react to these natural changes that happen to our bodies. And I want to emphasize that they are very, very natural. And we've been taught for so long that weight gain is always unhealthy and weight gain is always a bad thing. But for midlife women, it's actually a very healthy thing. And we can talk about that a little bit later on as well.
Let's talk about that now. Why is it a healthy thing? Yeah, you just piqued my interest right there really strongly. I'm like, tell me why.
Yeah. Well, for lots of reasons, it is, again, a very just normal thing. I remember being so impacted once. I got a biology textbook, and it was, or anatomy, I can't remember now, and it was sharing the diagrams of women's bodies over time. And as the woman progressed, it showed that naturally we might get a bit shorter and we might get a bit wider around our hips. And this was just a anatomy textbook. It was a very factual sort of thing that the woman was starting to get a little bit more of a tummy and a little bit more of their hips. And, we are not meant to be looking like our 20-year-old selves. We don't look like, when we're from a 20-year-old to a 10-year-old, we're not meant to look like our 10-year-old selves. From a 30 or 40 or 50-year-old, we're not meant to look like our 20-year-old selves. That's not natural, right? So why is having that weight around our hips healthy is, for lots of reasons, but it's incredibly healthy for us as middle-aged women because this fat in our midsection and this fat we're carrying on our body that is new, it actually holds on to estrogen. And even though we're no longer potentially ovulating, that fat allows our body to have a release of estrogen that can actually alleviate menopause symptoms. So it's very healthy. This fat is there for a reason. And it's also protective. I mean, you often hear about some body fat being protective for our organs as well. And, it's, again, just a way of protecting and relieving menopause symptoms as we get older. And I think, when I think of like grandmothers and I think of mother figures and, they just seem to me, this is me, I guess, looking at it now, when I see a curvy older woman, they radiate health to me. I don't know, they're just this voluptuous older woman. You just want to give them a hug. I don't know. When you see women that are quite skinny or that are losing a considerable amount of weight as they're getting older, one, that can be quite dangerous, but also it's not necessarily healthier than being in a curvy body as we age. It's also really stressful on our bodies when we engage in dieting as we're getting older, because it can affect our energy. It can affect our metabolism to go on and off of diets. That's been showed in the Biggest Loser study. They did a study on that show, The Biggest Loser, and it showed the impact that this yo-yo dieting had on people's metabolism. It can lead to disordered eating. It affects their self-esteem. It can also be incredibly stressful on our bodies, which increases cortisol. We've all heard, the negative impacts that high cortisol levels can have resulting from stress. So embracing our bodies and nourishing our bodies and taking care of our bodies as they are and letting our body do what it's naturally going to do is going to be a lot healthier long term than attacking our bodies.
Than attacking our bodies, yeah. Makes a lot of sense. And we see all of the writing about in perimenopause, menopause, how our cortisol is higher because of the hormonal fluctuations. And so then if you add on really restrictive dieting on that, I imagine that's going to give even more of an increase of cortisol, stress hormones in the system.
Oh, totally. Yeah. Dieting is incredibly stressful especially when it starts to not work, and you're trying everything and you're just I've been there. I know that feeling of constantly hating your body. That is not an unstressful state for your body to be in. And as we get older, like you say, that's even more important that we keep those stress levels down, as we all know the benefits of, having a low stress or lower stress life on our health. And dieting is, like I say, and body hate and body shame is incredibly stressful.
Oh, exactly. And I, being a midlife woman and somebody who does, a lot of research around menopause and midlife, and now bombarded with all of the diet programs, all of the menopause health programs, which many of them to me look like just another fad diet in disguise. And I'm very much generalizing. And then also the sort of the fad exercise diets, all aimed at women in midlife to, lose the weight, to feel healthier. But all that I have seen anyway are very, very restrictive. How on earth do we navigate that?
Yeah. They all, target that belly fat and target. They know exactly belly. They know exactly what we're suffering with. And, it's incredibly, it sounds difficult, but it's actually it's simple, but it's not easy, because we are bombarded with all these messages, and we are bombarded with things that are telling us every day that we're not good enough if we have belly fat. Or more scarily, I think, is the health shaming or scaring that we have. Like, if you're not doing this, if you're not losing weight, you're not going to live as long. You're going to get diseases. You're going to get this and this and that. All of those things are related to our behaviors, not what our body size is. And that's a hard thing for people to get their heads around, because we've been told for so long the opposite. And it is how we move our bodies, how we eat, how we live, that's going to impact disease and, being unwell. And despite whether our body changes. And so it's really hard for us to get our head around, but we can increase our energy. We can hopefully, in some cases, increase our longevity. We can, have a happier, healthier life by just focusing on those behaviors instead of our body size. Our weight is not a behavior. Whatever size we are is not a thing that we do. It's the healthy habits. And so firstly, probably the most impactful thing that anybody told me to do, but also what I tell others to do first and foremost, is to start being really aware of the messages that we're receiving on our screens, because we are on our screens a lot. So being aware of whenever we see those adverts for, midlife belly buster diet or whatever it may be, or whenever we see somebody else that's really slim and we perceive to be beautiful, but it's making us feel like we're not enough. Whenever we see anything that's telling us that we're not good enough in our current bodies, just unfollow, report. Whenever I get dieting adverts, I report as misleading or scam. Eventually you're going to start seeing less and less of those things. But that's not enough. And not a lot of people do that, and that's great. But I really encourage people to then start to follow people that are in different body sizes, people that are living with different body shapes and sizes. And that was really impactful to me, to see people in bigger bodies that are healthy, living their best lives, beautiful, and just to be more exposed to that. And people of different genders, people of different cultures, people, different abilities, people from different, just more variety, more diversity. And, I think that in itself has a huge impact when we start to see people of all different body shapes and sizes, because we live in these little bubbles on social media, and that's all we're seeing. Like, even whenever I sit when I go to Wellington, the city, I'm sit on the bus or in the cab or whatever, and I look around, and like, there's so many different body shapes and sizes. We all look so different to each other. And the more we expose ourselves and make ourselves aware of that, we can start to potentially look at ourselves a little bit differently, even though that's hard. But navigating it too is about, focusing on healthy behaviors that in order to feel good. So don't worry so much about whether your body changes with these healthy behaviors, but what can I eat that makes me feel good? What types of foods make me feel good? What kind of frequency of eating makes me feel good? And making it all about feeling good and having our, increasing maybe our better sleep or reducing our stress, rather than punishing our bodies because they're changing. And, keeping that focus on feeling good too. That might be having a piece of cake with your besties at the cafe. Like, that feels really, really good. So, but instead we get hung up on worrying about the calories in that cake. But actually maybe a quarter of that cake or half that cake or that whole cake actually still makes you energized and makes you feel good because, you're around great people and great friends. So just keeping the focus on what is making me feel good. Obviously, if we have cake every meal of the day, we don't feel good. So we may not want to do that. Maybe we feel great. I don't know. Maybe we've got this random body that thrives off cake. But, we are all different. And it's really important too that, health is about relationships and all of those blue zones. It's about community and relationships. And if you don't want to go out to dinner with your friends because you're worried about what's on the menu, you're limiting that aspect of your health, and you're not going to be able to create those, those memories because we're too scared of what's on the menu. And so we know that health is so much more than just our bodies. And so focusing on just that number and weight loss, we're really neglecting a lot of key areas that have been proven to impact our health. And even moving your body is a way to feel good and to have energy and to sleep better, as opposed to, I need to exercise because I ate a piece of cake, or I need to push myself because I'm considered overweight, or whatever it may be. Like, it's just a whole different way of looking at health. But yeah, I'm going to be the first to, admit that it's hard. It's a lot of unpacking, but it is equally rewarding. And it takes some time, but doing this, focusing on feeling good eventually is going to help you to feel good, isn't it?
Exactly. And I think you're right. There's so much unpacking there, but there's a lot of unpacking that we do in midlife anyway. We're looking at our boundaries and tendency to people please and our gender conditioning and all of that stuff. And I think diet culture very much is a part of that. Yeah. Beautiful. That's really helpful for me, because I think that's what I tend to do is is this helping me to feel good today, tomorrow, and the next day?
Yeah. And I'm sorry, I just wanted to add too that we're going to eat things that make us feel bad as well, and that's okay. I don't want people to think, oh, I can't eat this because and you feel good. It's just about what we do most of the time that matters. Yeah.
So if I'm eating, generally speaking, to feel good, how do I see the signs where I might be sort of encroaching in that territory of more disordered eating, and I can start to become aware of that? Like, what would tell me that? I mean, aside from really restrictive dieting, that kind of stuff, what are the more, if we bring it back a little bit, what are sort of some signs that would indicate that I'm maybe moving into more of a diet approach or more disordered eating?
Yeah. That's a really great question. I think it's going to be individual, but my first thing that comes to mind as a red flag would be when we feel fear or guilt or shame when we eat a certain food. So if we don't eat a certain food because of fear. So we may not, somebody might offer us a piece of cake and we really, really want that piece of cake, but we're trying so hard to be good, and we may not eat that cake because we might be afraid to eat it because it's not organic, or we might be afraid to eat it because of the sugar content. And so there's that fear that keeps coming up around certain foods. And also then there's obviously the feelings after eating those foods. So maybe we decide, we are going to eat that food. We feel, bad if we don't, but then we feel really awful about it afterwards, and we may over-exercise because of it, or we may just feel really down or shameful or guilty, or we might think, that's okay, I'll skip breakfast tomorrow because I ate that cake last night. So there's those, it all revolves around those feelings of guilt and shame or fear. It's like if you catch yourself not going to social events because you're scared of what's going to be on the menu, or you're going to feel like you're going to be embarrassed if you just get a salad and others are going to say something, it starts to encroach onto your emotional wellness, it starts to encroach onto your relationships, and it starts to encroach into just your overall mental well-being. Those are the red flags for me.
Right.
Impact those other three areas of your well-being circle: body, mind, spirit, heart. And even if we talk about spirit, when we're living a life of dieting and restricting and wanting to become smaller, personally, I believe that can impact on your life's purpose and the spiritual fulfillment when we're just controlling and micromanaging our lives, when, we're not allowing for that expansion. It's really, if I'm lack of a better way to describe it, I feel like it's like a big thumb keeping us down, So I think it can impact our spiritual, our purpose, everything. Or even I know that body shame and feeling bad about our bodies can impact, our finances. It can impact whether we go for that job promotion. Like, it can really impact our confidence in so many ways. And so when we start to see how again, while it's impacting those other key areas of our health, that's when it's a red flag for me. I can't eat that, it's bad, or I can't eat that, it's naughty, or, every once in a while, maybe let's say we decide we don't want to eat cake all the time. That's fine. But if we have it, we should be all like, oh, well, it's a nothing thing. It's a piece of cake.
Yeah. Or enjoying it because it's a really good piece of cake.
Yeah. Depending on who made it. Yeah. We're lucky in Taranaki. We've got some great cake makers.
Fantastic. So that got me thinking about, I guess in some parts of my world, there's a lot of detoxing that happens, but that's still within that same range, right, of diet.
And you mean like a detox diet, or like detox?
Yeah. No, I mean detox diet. Yeah. I mean, it's still dieting, right? It's still really restrictive eating. So everything you're talking about today, I could just overlay that onto the idea of detoxing.
Totally.
A detoxing diet.
Like, if you could, if you do a detox diet, which is, quite restrictive for a short time, and you're like, I'm just going to do it and I'm going to experiment and see how I feel, and, just do it, and you have no emotional attachment to it, and you can just do it. That's, I don't really see a huge harm. It's not going to hurt you physically to do that for a short time. It's not going to do much for your body, though, in the sense of our body can naturally detox itself. We don't need to do a detox diet. There are some times where we might be told we need to do an elimination diet, and hey, go for it and experiment. But again, once we start to then notice that we become fearful of eating, say, for example, gluten, because we're reintroducing it, or we're getting fearful of having sugar, or we're getting fearful of those things that we removed during the detox, that's when it can have a really negative impact. And I can talk from experience of doing detox diets and 10 years ago, and also recommending them, that they created a lot of fear around food, because those detox diets generally tell us that this is a bad food, that's a bad food, this is a bad food, this one's, sugar is going to hurt you, and carbs are going to hurt you, and gluten's going to hurt you. And so even though it's only a short term, it can really, for somebody who has a history of yo-yo dieting or disordered eating, it can be incredibly triggering to do these detox diets. And even for somebody who hasn't, it could open up some fear around food that they didn't have before. So I don't see any benefit of doing a detox, but if somebody did do it, it's not necessarily going to be a bad thing for everybody. But it's really, again, a marketing, way of making some money for somebody. I think personally, you might, again, feel great during that detox diet. For some people really like that sense of control, to have that week of, I'm just going to eat this, 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 and this. But long-term benefits of a detox diet are really quite nil. And in many cases, they can do harm. But again, it's personal choice. And if somebody wanted to give it a go, they didn't have any negative reactions to it, it's not going to necessarily do them harm. But there is a potential for harm for lots of people. And that's why I wouldn't recommend them.
Makes a lot of sense. I watched my mother she passed away 8 years ago, but from midlife all the way through till when she was 70, want to lose that extra 15 kilos. Mm-hmm. It was always, she was always wanting to lose that, and starting and stopping and trying this, and like having cupboards and cupboards of supplements and all of the rest of it. And I look at that now like, oh yeah, she was a product of her environment. That was everything that was fed to her in her growing up and her socialization. And we're all a product of our conditioning and our environment. So if this is showing up for us, it's not our fault. No. It's like, it's our upbringing, it's society, it's culture, it's everything that's everywhere on us. It's everywhere. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's why it's so important for us now, as we're learning this, to do what we can to break that cycle for those that come after us. What you don't know, but when you do know, you can start to support the younger generation. And I've got a program called Brave Bodies, which is all around body image for parents and teens. And I call it, I think back at the principle of 7 generations, which is an indigenous principle, and it's what you do now impacts 7 generations into the future. And so for us to be part of that change, even though we might still be struggling, we can still impact how our young people view their bodies and hopefully stop that cycle, because my mother was the same. And luckily, even though I'm sure she still has fears and stuff around what she eats, she's not dieting anymore. And I think that's just, it's taken her a long time to get there. And same with my sister, who's, no longer dieting, is now a non-diet practitioner as well. And, for us to get there together as, us 3 women is pretty cool, and we support each other. And I can remember reading about a 100-year-old woman who still weighed herself every day at the nursing home. And I just think that's just would be so soul crushing for me, I would hate to be 100 years old still worrying about my body. It's so freeing to be 45 and I'm like, this is my body. This is me. I'm just going to go have fun now. I'm just done with that. I'm belittled my body for so long. And yes, I still have times where I'm like, oh my gosh, this, there's cellulite on my body, or I've got more rolls and my hips are expanding, and it's still scary, but I just get on with it now and just go and do fun things and be grateful that my body is still moving and that I've still got my health. And, again, it's very freeing to no longer be to worry about those things as much, and to be able to go, man, I'm closer to 50 than I am 40 now. Surely I'm allowed to have some curves now. Come on. It's, it is freeing when we get to that point of just taking care of our bodies instead of punishing our bodies, which is essentially dieting is.
It's very liberating, isn't it? And I think of all of the energy. I haven't been a big dieter, but every now and then I have, and all of the energy that goes into that and all of that focus. And I think when we can claim that back for ourselves, and yes, we might have to do some unwinding work on, what's okay for our body and what we love about it and how it functions in the world, and we might need to shift our perspective. But it is incredibly liberating to be free from those traps. And just, sort of rounding out, I suppose, our conversation, it does become much more in our face in midlife, because our body is changing. And, when I peri-menopause, I used to go, I need to lose a few kgs, just adjust my diet slightly for a few weeks and things would change. Peri-menopause hits, nothing is changing it. It's just a slow creep. And now I've got to this place where I'm like, who gives a shit, right? Who gives a fuck? It's am I happy? Can I move in my life? Can I play in my life? Can I maintain strength? And if I'm not, what do I need to do about it? That sort of become my focus.
And do we have people that love us, and what would they say? And it's and I think too, a lot of people can be put off by improving their body image because they think they need to love their bodies, and that's really triggering for somebody who has lived their whole life hating their bodies to be like, I can't love my body, I can't. And that's fine. You don't have to love your body. It doesn't have to be body image. To be you suddenly fall in love with what your body looks like. It has nothing to do with what your body looks like. It's just about taking care of yourself and taking care of your body, and respecting your body, because it's going to carry you for the rest of your life. It's never about, if you can learn to love your body, that's great, but that's pretty hard for a lot of people. And instead it's about just, let's take care of this vessel that we're in, and that's not through dieting, it's not through punishing ourselves. And I think it's really important too to remember that our children are watching us, and so the behaviors that we're engaging in, we have to be really mindful that even if we don't think they are. And even in our language that we use, we're out with friends and and these sorts of things. So when we can work on ourselves, we're really helping that younger generation as well and stopping that cycle.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Michelle. How can people get in touch with you if they want to find out more about your work or potentially work with you in the future?
Yeah, so just if michelleyandle.com, nice and easy to find me. I have a couple programs. I have the Empowered Eating program, which is all around reclaiming a healthy relationship with food and obviously improving our health. But I really recommend that people start with my Brave Bodies program. And the beauty of the Brave Bodies program is that it is pay what you can. So if you can only afford $1, then just pay $1. And if you can afford more, then that's great too. And it all goes back into the program. So it's a really easy way to get to know me and my work, and as well as start to improve your body image, which I think is the first step in improving our relationship with food. Because the more we hate our bodies, the more we're going to want to keep changing it and restricting. So if we can start with the Brave Bodies and start with that body image, and encourage, if you have a teen in your life that may want to learn as well, or that's struggling with body image, they can do the Brave Bodies program too. You could do it together or separately, or we can even there's opportunities to do it as a group. And if people are interested, they can just get in touch with me. But yeah, those are my two key things. And finding me at michelleyandle.com is the best way, or just emailing me at hello@michelleyandle.com, or finding me on Instagram and all those fun places, Facebook and Instagram.
All the social.
Well.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Michelle. Those programs sound really, really helpful. And thanks for joining us on the podcast. And it's been really enlightening. Yeah, amazing. Thank you.
Thank you. It's been awesome.
Hey, thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the podcast, consider joining me on my signature course for women in midlife. The Midlife Upgrade course is made specifically for you so that you can embark on your second stage of life with calm, confidence, and courage. Join the waitlist over at my website to hear about early bird specials and when the next enrolment opens. Join the waitlist at megancare.co.nz/waitlist. Have a great week, and I'll talk to you real soon.